The idea of an ever-changing food landscape in a city is something that has been in my mind for long. What is this idea of, do you ask yourself, do you wonder where my food is coming from? Usually it's from the supermarket. Well, but it comes from a little bit farther. And that is the idea that, or I think it's in the starting point of this presentation, a conversation about food security in our neighborhoods. And I wanted to focus in Maloca Garden, this community garden that exists at YorkU campus. And for now, this is what I want you to have in mind. We are going to discuss the recipe of our presentation from food security and what does it mean in this big city, food landscape in the city, and what I call food in movement, that is a play around that I'm going to invite you to play with me. I'm going to introduce Maloca Garden for some of you that already know it and some that doesn't. Well, it's a beautiful place. I'm going to show you what it is and where is it. And then we're going to have an open conversation at the end, I hope, about the idea of farming. If you want to farm, this is a difficult thing to do. It's not so easy. Even for some experienced gardeners, they are going to say, first of all, it is not easy. But anyway, this is where I want you to travel with me. The first point, again, what is food security in our big cities? And in this case, food security is, from the textbook definition, this condition that exists when all people at all time have physical and economic access to sufficient, safe, and nutritious food. Okay, that food that has to meet their dietary needs and food preferences for an active and healthy life, whatever it means in the pandemic condition we have now. But this is the condition all governments and authorities of the countries of the world try to pursue. This condition of accessibility of food. It has 4 dimensions. One is food availability, that has to do with the production of domestic food and import food in the cases needed, even in case of food aid. But it's the condition of have that food all the time and having this production ongoing stably. And then the second point is food access. Food access has to do with the individual adequate access to the food through what is called entitlements. And here in Toronto, we can identify those different entitlements with what we call food deserts and food swamps. We're going to talk a little bit more about it later. The third point is utilization, that opens up the definition of more than food, just food inputs. In this case, it has to do with energy, adequate clean water, accessibility to spaces where to cook. And it goes even beyond to the access of food, but it goes into the preparation of food and who prepares this food and in what conditions are these preparations done. At the end, the 4 of these concepts is stability, something that we experienced very recently. At the very beginning of the lockdown and the pandemic in March, I remember going to the supermarket for the first time, the first day that say all the people say we have to stay at home and the government say we have to stay at home. I remember going to the supermarket that is just 1 block from where I live. I'm very privileged and that's it. Nonsense, sorry. And there was nothing in the shelves, nothing, almost nothing. And that is something that we have to ensure doesn't happen again when we talk about stability and food access and food security. Embracing the concept of food security is the concept of food sovereignty, because it emphasizes on the ecological appropriate ways of produce, distribute, and consume food. It emphasizes on socioeconomical justice in the process of distribution, production, and consumption of food. And it focuses strongly in local food systems as a way to tackle hunger and poverty, things that we were trying to build up in Toronto for long, but they are not strong enough yet. I have a question for you. When you feel food insecurity or when you identify a situation of food insecurity, do you think that one way to solve this is planting your own food? Because this is a invitation from an Oregon organization to the neighbors of this small city that they were distributing this flyer, asking, are you feeling insecure? Okay, we're going to send you seeds to grow your own food. And I'm still wondering if that is enough. But not in a bad way, in a really good way, I'm wondering if this is enough. The second point of this presentation has to do with this idea of food landscapes, or at least this idea of food in movement that I want you to play with me. This is a map of Toronto GTA. The tiny dots are supermarkets, and the red squares are the half-kilometer walking buffer around a supermarket. And then you're going to see in different degrees of green the number of travels that people has to do to go to the supermarket. You start to see something that I'm going to call the U shape. By the way, York University and its neighborhood is around this corner of the map, but these are the areas where you're going to see less travels, and this dark areas speaks about high density of population. We have this other map, and in here is much more clear. This is a map that combines two different things. One is income, and you're going to see a concentration of high to very high income neighborhoods in the center of the map, in this dark green and green areas, and then dark pink and light pink areas, low to very low income neighborhoods. And then you're going to see what kind of food is offered in these areas. A concentration of fast food venues in areas like this, close to York University, and obviously close to downtown, but this is a different situation. But then a lack of these dots of colors that we are looking for that are grocery stores or supermarkets. They are very sparse around this U-shaped area, okay? We have another map that I'm going to invite you to play with me. This map belongs to a beautiful organization. I hope it's going to take a little bit of time, but I'm going to claim the map right now for you to see a couple of things. First of all, community gardens. They are pretty sparse around the city. You can say that there is not a clear pattern around them. These are all the community gardens that exist. But when you think about emergency food programs, the U shape starts to show up. Or, for example, children's meals programs, and it's pretty clear where they are not and where they are focused or centered. Now, I'm going to tell you something. Let's see this map in terms of income. Going to the light green, very low income, to the dark, kind of black, areas of very high income in the center and extremes of the city. And then the U-shaped pattern take a clear shape. And now, when we invite again community gardens, they look very different, no? Now you can see that community gardens plays an important role in these neighborhoods, and they almost disappear at the center of the city. Okay, let's go back to the presentation. This is another map that you're not going to see easily. This is the map that Uber Eats drivers use to locate the areas of buses delivery and priority deliveries. Then you can see again, if you have in mind the shape, the U-shaped area where the deliveries are not priority or they are not strongly concentrated. A little bit in the North York, Young and Finch area, and of course, a full area in the GTA Toronto and Mississauga. But in this case, what I want you to see is still there is an avoiding of food distribution in these areas. What I want you to have in mind before we enter in the last part of the presentation are these ideas. Food growing spaces are connected with very low to low income neighborhoods, at least here in Toronto. Food growing gardens are avoided in areas of high to very high income because there is a distancing from food process that encouraged the idea of food gardens connected to poor people or people in need. And that is something we have to change. I'm going to introduce you to Maloca Community Garden. It was founded in 1999 for these two amazing women and a couple of assistants from the FES faculty in a place that we locate now. Maloca Garden. Maloca is the name of a special building in the center of the settlements of native people of the Amazonian River Basin in Ecuador, Colombia, and Brazil. It literally means basket of life. And it's a conical shaped building that represents their cosmos, how they go from the bottom to the top, ascending to enlightenment and knowledge. When I show you this map and I ask you, this is Kili Campus, where is Moloka? I bet that many of you are like, Maloca Garden, well, I don't remember. Let me see. Okay, let me help you. This is the subway station. This is your commons, the garden, and the common areas. This is Barry Hall, and this is the intersection of Pond and Sentinel. When you take a little bit detour to the west, you're going to find a detour to the Hoover House, the softball fields and the soccer field next to the Grad residences and the Cinnabon residences. In this tiny corner is located Maloca Garden. It's a 2,000 square feet place devoted to individual and communal plots growing vegetables. This is a picture of our last year 3 sister system planted in a communal area for a teaching plot that became a 2 sister system because someone was eating our squashes all the time. And we ended up having beautiful corn and beans, but not squashes. But anyway, everything is organic in here, flowering, native pollinators are encouraged here. It's a very beautiful and kind of wild space. I'm going to show you Maloka a long time, and I love the sequence of pictures. These are coming from Google Earth platform, and this is the first 2002 picture that is available about Maloka Garden. A couple of things interesting. The location of Maloka Garden was in here, in the soccer field, not in where Maloka is. A little bit of Black Creek was misplaced in here. The village didn't exist yet. It was a long, huge parking lot around the residences. But this is the first beginning of Maloka Garden. We jumped to 2005. We still have the long spaces for parking in here, but now we have Maloka Garden well located where it is, and a little bit clearer and bigger the construction of the garden around this place. 2007, and you can see clearly the access to the garden a little bit bigger, and a little bit of the structures that we know now. 2009. Undoubtedly, this is Maloka Garden. These are the individual and communal plots, the access to the garden, clearly the areas of softball, soccer field disappear a little bit. 2012, we have a jump in here. And I want to start you to pay attention to the space that is next to the garden. Here, the garden, and there's a space in here. Look at this. In 2013, it appears to be cleared up. By 2013, end of the year, it was clearly identifiable as a space in here with a lot of construction or things happening, and then this garden in here. 2014, some of the garden was already worked from here. And then in 2015, the first ever class imparted at Maloka Garden appears. This was a grad class for master and PhD students of the Faculty of Environmental Studies and open to other faculties too. And then you can see how huge the garden is now. It's a little bit bigger in here, this communal area worked, and this teachable area really, really well developed until it gets this way. Absolutely developed, beautiful. 2016, it was still on work. It was still being used, but at the end of the next year, you're gonna see that it's gonna disappear. It literally disappeared. It was graced. It's still totally green, totally clean, like nothing happened. And then in 2018, you're gonna see something happening in here. There's a square, tiny points, were part of a greenification project, and a set of trees were planted in here, seedlings planted in here. And the garden has the size that you already know. What happened after that is the greenification project wasn't really successful. The bushes overgrow, and this is the shape that we see in the garden since last year. This is the common area that is dedicated for education, and we cannot access to this other part of the garden. And the individual and communal areas looks like we always saw them. This is 2021 proposal. This garden is dedicated to the Finding Flowers project and the native pollinator garden. This is going to be the class plot. And if everything goes well, this is going to be the cooperation we're going to establish with Sundance Collective. These are some pictures of Moloka. This is 2008 that you see. We always worked in a crowded kind of wild area, growing things with whatever we have at hand. We have some unusual and usual visitors, really, really pretty. We have even things happening at the very hall, and I love this to come back to this presence of Maloka in our premises. This is early spring 2020. Is this a meadow? It is. It is a beautiful meadow. This was supposed to be the area we were going to teach in, but because of the COVID, we didn't, and it was took back by nature. It's beautiful. It is amazing. This is a little bit late in June. This is a common area and access to the garden. You remember this is the path that access to the garden. And then you're gonna see some of the plots of early summer this year. Beautiful. Some garlic that was common and available every year. And then some brave gardeners that decided to continue working in the garden like this beautiful communal plot, individual plot. But what happened with Moloka? Moloka grew wild, independent, yes, for sure. But also it means that Moloka was out of funding, out of innovation and safety and good governance and accountability. And this is the other thing we want to change, because speaking about food security, we really need accountability and good governance. This is a way to guarantee food sovereignty beyond food security. This is last part of the presentation. Do you want to farm? Because farming is not easy. And every time you grab your carrots and potatoes and apples, I want you to ask, have a serious conversation with that food and ask, who was planting you? Who harvested you? Why are you here in my table so easily? Because growing food in the city is not easy. And for that part of the presentation, I'm gonna really thank Lorraine Johnson for a great list of work and conversation that inspired this section. This is what the city recommends as a natural garden. You know, like there's environment that benefits birds and butterflies and other wildlife, that's very vague definition of wildlife, that is managed within certain boundaries, you know, that contains both native and non-native plants. This comes from the fact sheet natural gardens from the city of Toronto. But you have rooftop garden. This is a real rooftop downtown Toronto. It looks like this, but there are bylaws for rooftop too. And then you're gonna see, okay, but what is happening if I want to grow food in my boulevard or in my front yard? Well, yeah, but take a minute. It has to be a soft landscape. It has to have some certain height, no more than, you know, I think a little less than a meter, just to not obstruct vision and visibility. And the way you grow the things has to be very healthy and free of noxious weeds. I always love the definition of a weed. You know what is a weed? It's a plant that grows in the wrong place, okay? But who defines what is the wrong place of a plant, eh? We have this idea here. And I want you to have this in mind at the end for the conversation. It is necessary to neutralize the idea and the sight of food in city public spaces because we don't see them and we don't like to see them usually. Because hiding or distancing from food production and food growing is part of what is city building against what is labeled as a countryside, okay? Farming in the city requires a lot of knowledge, inputs, space, energy, a lot of dedication. You have to be very tolerant to frustration because it's not going to be good at the very beginning. It's going to take a lot to harvest whatever you dream to harvest, a lot of creativity, but also a change of diet. And the acknowledging of the seasonality of the products you are going to eat. And sometimes rebellion. And that is one of the first lessons I learned from gardeners here in Toronto. You have to be rebellious. You have to not contempt. You have to go beyond what is said and go. Take it and plant it. And I feel that is a beautiful way to face urban gardening. At the end, urban farming and community gardens. What do you think? Can we guarantee food security through community gardens and individually grown gardens for food? Can we guarantee that we take back a little bit of control on the food system? Well, these are the kind of things I want to discuss with you in this conversation. Thank you very much.